The Homesteads to Hollywood podcast is a CJSW original production funded by the Radio Meter Program Grant through the Community Radio Fund of Canada. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we would also like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kaanai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary, traditionally recognized by the Blackfoot name of Mohkinstsis, is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6.
Part 10. Wind, Reel, and Print.
From Cool Runnings to The Revenant and Brokeback Mountain to The Last of Us, cinematic star power didn't just happen to Alberta. In fact, the province has a long and illustrious history in film that has developed into an internationally renowned industry. From Homesteads to Hollywood, Alberta takes center stage in this 10-part exploration into how things came to be and where they're going. My name is Liam Dawe.
And I'm Ingrid Vargas. Together we'll be peeling back the layers of Alberta's intricate film industry to answer the question, just how did we get here? There are many elements that each play their role in this ecosystem, such as a storied past, a vibrant underground, a deep talent pool in the trades, and of course, the continuous run-on blockbusters. It's been a 10-month-long journey in answering that question for our team, some of whose voices you've yet to hear. For the series finale, we're turning on a couple of extra mics for some team members whose contributions to the podcast, until now, have been behind the glass. Maria Pletneva, our editor, and Natalie Schmidt, our coordinating producer. The creation of this podcast was equivalent to making a documentary, an odyssey in discovery, dissection, surrender, and the unexpected. Together we'll be discussing what it took to get us here, at wrap, so to speak.
This conversation from late June 2024 was moderated by CJSW's podcast coordinator, Kareemi, one of the uncredited members of our crew who helped production on this podcast run smoothly. Take a listen.
What preconceptions did you have about the film and TV industry in Calgary and Alberta? And we'll start off with Liam.
I didn't have much of a preconception about Alberta's film industry. I think it was mostly tied. I had an older sister who was an extra in Brokeback Mountain, so I knew that was a big deal. I knew she met Anne Hathaway and Heath Ledger, and that was kind of a big deal when it came to town. And then again, in like the mid-2010s when Revenant was a big film. But other than that, not much. I thought that it was kind of like a town that got the odd large production, but kind of waited it out in between. I didn't know that there was kind of consistent series that shot here. I didn't know that there was like a permanent, economy that revolved around the Alberta film industry. But I would say that mainly kind of like the Brokeback Mountain. I was born in the mid-90s, so a lot of the older history wasn't as relevant to me. So I think the first thought that I had, because this is when I was around 10, was that Brokeback Mountain was shooting here, and that was a big deal. That was about it for me.
Natalie?
I think that I share similar preconception as Liam. Like, obviously, I knew we had a film industry here, but I didn't realize the scale and the history. Like, obviously, I knew about the Marilyn Monroe movie that was here, and I knew about Days of Heaven, but I didn't know about all of these other things that don't get as much chatter about. I knew Heartland, and I thought Heartland was like the biggest thing we had going for us. Up until The Last of Us, right?
Ingrid?
For me, because I worked in industry, it wasn't so much preconceptions, but it was kind of having too much of a bias towards an old lover. So it was a really fun challenge for me to try to dissolve that bias and try and see things with new eyes. Yeah, so that was interesting. It was a creative and personal journey for me.
Maria?
Well, it's kind of hard for me to say because I was born and raised in Russia all the way up until 18 years old. So I was raised on Russian movies specifically. But when I came here for the first time, the first thing that came to mind is how magnificent the mountains are. And I guess just answering this question, I feel like that was based on having the mountains around it. This is what it kind of came for a lot of filmmakers to come film here because of the spectacular scenery.
What misconceptions have you found that you had about the industry that may have been broken or confirmed by the series? We'll go reverse order. Maria?
Oh boy, that's on the spot, isn't it? Well, coming back to actually this conversation that the mountains was like the main reason why people would come in, but there's also other things that I didn't really know about. For example, the tax breaks that makes movie cheaper, basically, right? I feel like the biggest misconception is that we have incredible crews, and this is what we found out here, that we have incredible and talented crews here, and that should be the main reason why people should come in here, because while we have the mountains, but here's the thing, probably 30-40% of our planet has these types of mountains somewhere, right? Regarding tax breaks, the economy is always going to change, right? But the quality of the talent that we may have here and we actually trying to make is what should make people come in here more often and actually create beautiful movies here.
It's a really hard question for me to answer. Yeah, like I mentioned, I definitely had a bias because of personal experience. But I guess my misconception that got unraveled was just like learning to appreciate and kind of fall in love with the medium again within the context of it in Alberta, and just how much I think we're misconceived as a province that has so much talent and like potential, not just as a facilitator of Hollywood films, but it's so full of people who can create them as well. Yeah, I guess it was like affirming to see that talent is so prevalent and will persevere over time.
Well, I think the biggest misconception that I had about the industry was just how much deeper it is than I originally thought. In a multitude of different ways, even just speaking with guys like Damien Petty, how far back even IATSE's history goes in Calgary in this chapter 212. When we talk to Mary Graham, the history goes back to like the late 1800s. I was thinking this is a city that's a relatively new city in a country that's a relatively new country. And I thought that maybe the film roots go back to like the mid 20th century, maybe the 70s and 80s is kind of what you hear about. The Olympics were a big time and the Disney film.
Cool Runnings,
yeah. I thought that may have been the genesis of film in Alberta outside of maybe some Westerns. And I was really surprised to find it went like 70 years deeper than that. So that was probably the biggest misconception I had, is how new I thought the industry was when the roots were planted like over 100 years ago. And that goes into different sectors as well. I didn't know that sound stages were so prevalent in Calgary, and that the VFX crews and the sound crews have kind of like superseded the industry standards, or the kind of the average. And that was something that kind of was unveiled to me by Damien. I was surprised to hear that, and I didn't have any kind of, I guess, preconception about that. So I guess you can call it a misconception. But overall, I'm just kind of still in awe about how rich and deep the history is compared to what I originally thought it would be.
Not to keep piggybacking off of what Liam says, but yeah, I think that misconception of mine was that we just film Western movies here, and that it's just like horses and cowboys, and that's pretty much it. At the end of this, it feels so obvious now, but I never really thought of Alberta as being a place where you could make like indie films, or that there was like genre movies here. When I would think of the film industry, just be like, oh yeah, horses and Heartland and Brokeback Mountain and sure, like that is like a big part of our film industry, but I guess it was just thought that was almost like the only part.
Yeah, like the general misconception that Alberta is like uncool.
I think also the general misconception that Alberta is just rural.
Yeah, totally. I guess for me, it made me think of Alberta as like a contemporary sort of a place, and not just a place kind of, stuck in like the rural past or whatever.
What was the most surprising thing that you learned while producing this series? And maybe we'll start it off with Ingrid this time.
I think when we talked to Mary Graham, just like the depth of the history and how far back it went surprised me a lot. And just how like quietly it's been building up over time, but just those like deep ties to Hollywood from like the turn of the century just kind of really blew my mind and gave me a much deeper appreciation for all the work that people have done to like maintain that over the years. It made me feel very proud to be Albertan.
You know, I feel like I'm coming off as not being a very original person, but I think I was also very surprised how far back our history goes. You know, like I thought, you know, Days of Heaven, the Marilyn Monroe movie, was the one outlier, and that really film only really started in the 90s, right? Yeah, really, as Ingrid said, like really changed my perspective. And it makes me proud to be Albertan. Like, you know, it's surprising to hear that Alberta doesn't get like the funding that other provinces get, but that's also at the same time like not surprising at all, because you're like, oh well, like that makes sense. It's surprising in the way that it's like a fact, you know, because you always would be, you know, going to film festivals, and the majority of the Canadian films would be, you know, from Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver. So hearing that, oh, like they do actually get more funding, like I don't know,
It's jarring. Like it's a little bit jarring. You're like, what?
Yeah, I guess jarring is more of exactly the word.
I mean, honestly, like just even like backing Ingrid here, like for me, there's like 2 points, honestly. The first one, I feel like, is the Indigenous involvement in the cinema specifically, because Mary Graham was even saying when she was researching all of this that the Nakota and a lot of filmmakers there, they were actually working together to make sure that the Nakota deserves the spotlight that they really need, because like throughout the whole discrimination era, basically, I mean, it hasn't stopped, unfortunately, but they really tried to bring the light to them and actually praise them for what they do and how they do it and all that stuff. Another thing that kind of surprised me was also throughout like talking to all of these filmmakers that we've interviewed here, a lot were saying that a lot of people here think that it's a very transitory area, that Alberta, Calgary, and Edmonton, this is something that where people start their careers, but they continue and progress their careers somewhere else. And while Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver, they all three giant cities that attracts like thousands and thousands of people every year, Alberta probably has way more stories to find and actually talk about it and like find the creativity in there. And I feel like this is something that people should probably think about, that instead of like moving away somewhere, maybe you should try to stay here and actually figure out how you can make it work, especially because like the minimum wage is up, like it's the highest in the country, and we're actually trying to make sure like the housing crisis is not crisis, but you know, it might take some time. But yeah, just as long as like people actually realize the value of Alberta in their works, maybe we'll bring the scenery back, the beauty of the filmmaking here.
There's so much to cultivate here. Yeah, and I think that goes unnoticed.
For sure, yeah.
I'll try and think of something that hasn't been said. I mean, that's the downside of going
try
last.
that,
You have to
Liam.
think the longest, but you also
I'm trying to
have the
space
least
out who
amount
goes
of,
last every time.
You should, Natalie can go first next time so that she has an original thought. I'm just joking. I think I was surprised at how much in-house kind of organizations existed that kind of orbit the film industry. I'm talking about the AMPIAs, the CSIFs, the M-Medias. It started really early with Quick Draw, FAVA. Like those are just a handful of the dozens. And you can look up the AMAS website to find the list of organizations and associations that even just fall under them. And there's some that are still outside of that and peripheral to that. So I thought that the amount of different bodies that exist within or adjacent to the film industry was probably the most, I was going to say exciting, but surprising thing. And then this is all kind of pertinent to episode 6. So if you're listening to just this episode for the first time, which I don't know why you would be, go back and listen to the part 6 where we kind of go into a deep dive about all of these things. AMAS, they have like a couple dozen different organizations within that alliance, and there's some that exist outside of it too. So there's some history with that organization in particular. They had this kind of meeting and these different councils for over a decade, and they finally like solidified an agreement or an alliance, if you will, that kind of brought everything under this umbrella, because there was so many different satellite organizations. So now it's channeled a little bit more directly and streamlined, but I was surprised to know about how many different little existential bodies within the film industry were around. I mean, it signifies like a healthy industry, I think, with that, just the amount, the volume, but still surprising.
I know, Natalie, you had a question.
Okay, so the first question that I had prepared is, what were some challenges that you overcame?
I can go first because I have some that are like at the forefront of my cortex.
Do it.
Well, just when we first started, there was a lot of emphasis on getting it right. I still feel that there's a pressure to get it right, but not being involved really in the film industry, not knowing a lot about, especially the independent side of the film industry, I wanted to make sure it was right and correct, factual. So I put a lot of emphasis on research, and I did put myself behind on production just because I was so hyper, fixated on research and developing an idea before exploration. Looking back, maybe it would have been better to jump head first in, but I was reading books and articles for months before even putting pen to paper on some stuff. And I thought that was really challenging. I'm not a big research. I mean, I think research is important. It's paramount, okay, in anything. But I just don't like doing it. So it was challenging for me. That was, and just the kind of the workload that we created for ourselves. This series could have been 30 episodes, and it wouldn't have like been dry or anything like that. So the pressure to fit everything into 10 parts and also fit it in neatly.
I can bounce off of that because I resonate like wanting to do it right, especially as someone who's a filmmaker, who knows filmmakers, and who really like cares about the community. Like I wanted to do right by my people, and I'm not sure if I did, because honestly I wish we would have had a year to prep this podcast, just to like give everyone a platform to kind of speak their mind and contribute to it. But yeah, that was a challenge, but I'm still really proud of everything we accomplished, and I think people will walk away with a lot. It might be information overload, but yeah, I think there's a lot of good things to take away from it. And yeah, no, it was a fun challenge for sure.
I feel like for me is I haven't been in post-secondary school for probably 6-7 years already. So my last project was back in 2016. So coming back to it, being in the group and actually working on something together is definitely not my forte and not something that I'm really used to. I am a team player in the work that I work at, but it's not exactly the same, because this is something that takes months of planning and also takes a consistent, like it's a very long-term work that I'm still kind of getting used to it, and I'm actually trying to learn the patience from it. And also a bit of a getting rid of the perfectionism in me, because having like the musical ear trained, it's definitely puts a lot of pressure on me when I'm hearing something that is not like consistent and out in editing it and like never figures out how or why, and like trying to learn like to do better. It puts a pressure, it puts a stress, but the whole point is to like learn how to overcome it and actually make the better out of it. So yeah,
we really had to like surrender to the process of it, because this was also, I think, everyone's first podcast. Maybe I don't speak for Liam, but it was definitely my first podcast, and I think Maria and Natalie and I's.
Okay, so I think a challenge for me that I overcame was haven't really done a job like this before, going to people, doing pre-interviews, asking questions, stuff like that. So I felt, really nervous and a lot of pressure at first to, I guess, echoing everyone else, like to be perfect and to be like, I'm the most professional person in the world. And, but nerves would get to me. And, especially like talking to people, you research them before and you're like, oh wow, like this person made this film, like they're a celebrity, and now you gotta email them and talk to them and say, hey, do you want to talk on our podcast? And so getting over those nerves, and also interviewing is a skill you have to learn. And I definitely feel that at first I struggled to talk and to think of interesting questions that would get interesting answers that would then help the crew build an interesting podcast. That was something that I struggled definitely at first how to do, but I felt over time that I was able to talk to people better, that I was able to think of better things to ask, and to be able also to match their energy and bounce off of what they said. So that's something that I'm proud of.
What parts of the Alberta filmmaking history were not properly portrayed in the series, and what do you think people will take away after listening to the series, or what do you want them to take away? Maria?
I guess kind of comes to mind, we haven't really fully dove into BIPOC representatives of filmmaking industry. But here's the thing, we've dove into indie films, we've dove into LGBTQ representatives, we've dove into Indigenous representatives. And I feel like BIPOC is it's a part of multiple episodes that we've covered. But if we would dove specifically into that, I feel like we could have made another episode, definitely. But what I would like for people to take is actually, I made a count on how many movies and TV series that we've mentioned throughout this whole 10-episode series, and I actually counted over 40 pieces that we've mentioned. But I feel like the take is to listen to all of our episodes and actually find those movies and watch them, because the amount of Alberta-made movies, even partially made Alberta movies, there's just a lot of them. 40 is just a number just for this 10 episodes, and the amount of that you may find later is way more than that, and it will continue growing, especially with, as Damien Petty said in episode 9, that there's a Netflix agreement that has been signed, so I'm assuming that we're going to be having a lot more blockbuster representatives here.
The first question was about things that we didn't mention, which could have been, there's 1,000 things we didn't mention. I'd say most of it was touched on. It's just more of the expansion of some of the thoughts that we just, put forward but didn't expand upon. So you could go back into especially the mid-century, the 60s were basically flown over, and then the 70s and 80s, we mentioned a few films, but you could really unpack those if you wanted to. And the same goes for the early 2000s. There's a lot of films that I don't even know if we mentioned, like Superman 2, Superman 3, some big ones in the early 2000s that there's just not enough time, enough space to devote a whole segment to, or a bunch of minutes in a 27-minute podcast to. So I think a lot of that is what was missed. And I wouldn't necessarily say missed, just kind of glossed over. And as far as a takeaway goes, if you're like me and you didn't really have a preconception, you don't have a ton of knowledge about this industry, you're going to take away a lot. And if you are someone that maybe even works in the industry and you're shaking your fist at some of the things you've heard us say or not say, just know that we know that there's so much that we missed and it wasn't intentional. Sometimes it was intentional just because there's not enough time or space. But I think as far as what we did include, it was the most essential components to the industry, and that was deliberate.
Yeah, I can bounce off of that too, because I think we also tried our best to approach it with a bit of nuance and not just, I think parts of it feel like a love letter, other parts of it are like, there's something wrong here and I think we should do something about it. So yeah, I think there's nuance to it. I think there's hope to it. Yeah, there's lots of layers we didn't get to peel back, but I hope people kind of go on their own journeys and try to peel those back themselves, or at least, yeah, my hope is that people can walk away listening and then have conversations about it and see what it brings up for them and like the arts sector in general.
Yeah, I know that for a while in early production, we were thinking about doing an episode on, cult classics that were filmed here. We had a lot of ideas for potential episodes about, like different niche subjects that would have been really interesting to explore. But yeah, just as everyone said, there's only so much time and only so many minutes in the podcast.
Education might be a good one too. Like the perspective of like where you can study, what you can study, how you can study. Because like one of the, like in the panel, they were mentioning that there is no actually a bachelor degree type of style education in Alberta for filmmaking. And that's actually kind of surprising. So there's a lot of people here who study like at SAIT or in Edmonton. And yeah, and I feel like education might have been a good one, just to see like where the future filmmakers can land in terms of finding the skills and their peers.
Our panel of filmmakers, episode 5, goes into it a little bit.
The prairie problem.
The prairie problem is what it's called. And a bit of context on there, none of those people knew each other, and they talked like old friends on that podcast. And I just wanted to kind of make that clear. Like these were people that we stuck in this room that we're talking in right now. We put them in the room unintroduced, and that's what we got out of it. So that was pretty.
Last question, very simple. First word that comes to mind when I say Calgary film or Alberta film.
Community.
Contemporary.
Location.
I wanted to say Last of Us, just because it's too famous right now, unfortunately, and there's just so many locations that were mentioned there. It's just like
there's so many things like location, and I guess that could be 3 words. You can just say location. But watching some of my friends are like going through Yellowstone right now, and I caught a few episodes, and I was like surprised that it wasn't filmed in Alberta. Like now I see Alberta in places that it's not. I think that's so location is underscored for me.
Blue Sky City.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for chatting with me and for producing the series.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, have fun listening. We had a lot of fun and a lot of struggle, but I think it'll be worth it, and I hope you enjoy it.
That's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and that you can walk away with a deeper appreciation for the mediums of audio and film being produced here in Alberta.
We'd like to formally thank everybody who played a part, big or small, in helping produce this project. Our deepest appreciation goes out to Mary Graham, John Scott, Trevor Solway, Michelle Thrush, Sandy Summers, Michelle Wong, Paige Bedreau, Kyle Thomas, Contra, Vicky Van Chow, Alex Mitchell, Scott Lang, Brian Owens, Brenda Lieberman, Mardell Olson, Edmund Rotia, Heather Noel, Damian Petty, Valerie Sue, Eric Pauls, Nicole Wolfe, Helen Young, Cam Sifford, Emily Donville, and Kaamil Kareemi. Homesteads to Hollywood is a CJSW original recorded and produced in Calgary, Alberta. Our outreach coordinator is Natalie Schmidt. Audio editing is from Maria Pletneva. Assistant production and research from Ingrid Vargas, and is executively produced by myself, Liam Dawe. Music for this episode, including the theme track you heard during the intro, is composed by Calgary's own Young Neighbors. Artwork credit belongs to Calgary-based artist Nicole Wolfe.